Hi, Sam from Guitar Village here, and today I am joined by the legendary pedal builder, Roger Mayer. When you look at some of the artists that have used Roger's pedals over the years, it's incredible. And I want to get to know Roger a little bit better and find out how he got started. So, Roger, welcome.
Thank you very much for having me. Yeah, it's nice to come out to see you and the team in Farnham.
Ah, brilliant. Well, I've got lots of questions for you, but
Yeah.
I would like to start at the beginning, if that's okay. I want to take you back to 1964.
That's not quite the beginning, yeah, but we could start from around that era, yeah, for sure. No problem.
So what were you doing at the time? You were employed?
Basically, I grew up and started my quest for tone, right, back when I was 15 or 16. And I was still at school, and I hadn't at that point joined the Admiralty Research Laboratory. So at that time, I used to go out and see the local bands who were playing locally, and the people that played in those bands then were people like Jeff Beck, Jimmy Page, and the Rolling Stones were just beginning, around the 1962, 1963. And so I got to see these bands in their actual genesis, and that was very interesting. And my sister went to St. Martin's Art School, so she was very hip to what was, breaking at the time, which was the actual beginning of the London R&B scene, with the London take on the American R&B, because R&B and soul music and this and that was probably more popular in England than it was in America at the time, especially with the white audience, So that's how I first started, and I used to go back to Jimmy Page's house in Epsom, and we'd listen to all the latest American records that he had sent over with Jeff Beck at the same time, and we were very interested in why the American records sounded so great, and so different. So that was really what got me interested in what makes the, records sound different, and that's what got me started. And at that time, Jimmy Page, he's 2 years older than me, he was just about getting into the London session music scene. And he introduced me to, several session musicians. One was Big Jim Sullivan, and he was the first people to actually use one of my first fuzz boxes that I developed back then on a hit record, And so started very young. So I was about 18 when I was actually involved with like first #1 record with Big Jim Sullivan playing behind PJ Proby, and Jimmy Page was playing with a lot of the up and coming young people as well, because he was playing on an awful lot of sessions, like all kinds of records, with the Kings, all kinds of people. And so I got into the London music scene very early with top session musicians.
Yeah, there's some great names, and actually you've got Jimmy Page, Jeff Beck, in there, Big Jim Sullivan, massive session player.
Vic Flick, who did, of course, the James Bond theme.
Yeah.
He was another early user of Roger Mayer stuff. And then I also did, I want to let you know, a little bit later, I was the first person in England to electrify a piano that was used by the National Teams live. And so I developed a special contact microphone that was used by John Horgan, who was a guitar player for the National Teens, and that and they went on tour with a lot of people, American visiting artists. So it was we were breaking ground, not only just on the piano but on the guitar side as well, and using quite a few of the early records. Dave D. Dozy, Biggie McIntitch, they used my stuff. The guys from Deep Purple used my stuff, and all kinds of people who were up and coming. They were just breaking through then.
So was this the same for you? I guess at the same time you were kind of designing these pedals for people to use, and they were going straight to young musicians.
Well, the idea, well, the real aim was to have the pedals used on hit records. I've always concentrated on that. I don't make pedals, you know, for people just to play in the bedroom. I want the pedals to be used in anger on a record because that's the only way you can judge your success. If your electronics is not being used on a hit record by the top artist, you're doing something wrong.
Absolutely. I think your career speaks for itself. You've been doing it for 6 decades.
Well, yeah,
Not top of your game.
yeah. But I'm just saying that, yeah, that's by trying hard, and also by being absolutely brutal with your analysis of what sounds good. It's not necessarily what I think sounds good, but you develop a sense of how it might sound on an amplifier next to you, and then how it's actually going to sound on a record or on a radio station. It's that transition that people forget. You know, they think, oh, well, I'm going to listen to a record. You know, that's the most fatal mistake I would say that people make is they listen to a record, right? Doesn't matter when, what era. And then they assume that they can sound like that in their own living room, right? And this is totally wrong. And I completely dispel that myth because they haven't taken into account the full manufacturing process of recording it, going into production, going into, you know, whether it's cut on vinyl, whether it's going through tape, whether it's being remastered. I mean, the actual sound that you get in a recording studio at best is 7 generations away from what anybody can hear at home. 7 generations away, so it's nowhere near. But everyone's up against the same problem, you know, and also when you make a record, especially back then, it had to be, you know, mono, 45. It has to go on a jukebox, has to sound loud. It has to sound good on an AM radio station. It's got to sound good in a pickup truck. It's got to have a particular, you know, sound or stamp to the sound that's going to implant in someone's memory, so that you can listen to, say, an Elvis Presley record, 8 seconds, you know it's Elvis. Bang.
Yeah.
No question about it. Not only because of his voice, but because of the way the record's been produced. The same thing would be true of, you know, Buddy Holly. The same thing would be true of some of the rockabilly artists. So it's very, very important, and people used to concentrate an awful lot back then on getting a personal sound because they could sell that. You can't market sound if you sound like everybody else, can you?
Definitely not.
No, it would be like, you know, I mean, it must be unique, or you've got to be as unique and as apropos to the moment in time and history that you can make it. Then you got a chance of being successful. If you're 6 months behind the curve, especially back then, you're out of the game.
Yeah.
You're totally out of the game, you know.
So with your first designs with pedals, you said some of these great players were using them. Did you get feedback from them and change them as you
Of course, yeah, because there would be no reason if you're an electronic designer from scratch, and you know, by then I was working for the government. There's so many variations that you can make that there would be no reason to use the same sound for one track as you would for another. Yeah. Why would you? If you could change it, you wouldn't, would you?
No, that's
it would be like, you know, an artist making a painting, and he's got a palette in front of him. He's going to mix up each colour for each part of the picture, isn't he?
Yeah.
And it goes from day to day, and as the lighting changes, he changes his colours and the tonal qualities of the palette, which is the approach that the people I was working with. That's the approach that we had. There would be no point in making the next record with the same sound as you used on the last one.
Yeah.
Waste of time.
So it gives you this new sound. And when you were developing these, so would you work in closely with, say, Jimmy Page on developing this sound?
Because we're both sitting down in the same room and tweaking the pedals, and he said, "Oh, that's a great sound. I'll try it out tomorrow on a particular session."
That's great.
and let you know how I got on. And then a week later, you know, the record's been released, you see. So
that's incredible. So you built a unit, Jimmy Page's, and you have developed it together in the same room, sat there,
similar, yeah.
and then he's taken it away. Were you nervous, waiting to hear his feedback after the record?
So why would we be nervous? Because it's already been auditioned by us.
Yeah.
So we think, oh, well, that's the best we can do today. So what's there to be nervous about? Nothing.
Fair enough.
Just
You're a better man than me.
just find a place on the track that they can use it. So a particular producer would rely upon one riff or a 2-bar riff in a record to make the record sound different and get it over. Whether it's on the intro, it's a solo or whatever. I mean, records are made like that with iconic riffs. I mean, you could listen to Motown, My Girl, just the bass riff to begin that off. I mean, you hear that and you go, wow. It's an iconic sound, and that's the way I've always approached the sounds with all the artists I've worked with. They don't come to me to sound like anybody else, do they? Why would they?
No. And so what else was around when you were, what other pedals, amps, what were people using then?
Well, basically, people, making a record, you would use what was appropriate for the session. If you were doing a rhythm part, you would use an amplifier that was good for that. There weren't that many amplifiers around bass 64, 65. I mean, obviously you had the Fender amplifiers, you had a few Gibson amplifiers. There were a few English ones. I'm not sure. Vox came out with the Beatles, but they weren't particularly used on an awful lot of records because the sound wasn't very adaptable to many different genres of music. It was too kind of focused. So, it wouldn't be as universally used as maybe say a Fender. I would say a Fender amplifier is the most universal amplifier.
One that can cover lots of ground.
Well, yeah, because it interfaces very well with other pedals and other processing, and it's a traditional amplifier that's been used on hit records, from country to it's got a fantastic hit, I voice all my pedals initially on a Fender amplifier.
Okay.
Yeah, I voice them on a 57 Fender Super, so because I know if it sounds good on that, we can transfer it to other amplifiers, you see.
Yeah, well, like Marshall, Jimmy was using quite a lot, wasn't he?
Yeah, but Jimmy used Marshall for performance-wise. Now, in the actual recording, no, he used a bunch of different amplifiers. He used Fender, he used Soundsteady, and a few other amplifiers, because you cannot get all the sounds that you hear on a, say, Axis Bolt's Love from a Marshall. It doesn't happen, and didn't happen that way.
How did you meet him?
I met Jimmy a few days after my 21st birthday at the Bag of Nails Club in Soho, and basically, his music had come to my notice not only from his fast-growing reputation within the London music scene, but also he had appeared on Ready Steady Go and had performed Hey Joe. Now, everybody who obviously at the time I knew, Christ, you've really got to go and hear this guy play because he's totally out of sight, He will blow your mind, So after my 21st birthday party, I rocked up to the Bag of Nails and I went down and saw him. Now, at this particular club, it wasn't a very big club, but everybody was there. I mean, everyone from the Beatles to, it's like a who's who of the music industry. And we're all sitting down there in the room. And then Jimmy comes on and he does his performance. It's unbelievable. It was unbelievable because you'd never seen so much showmanship and so much control of feedback. You've never seen it before. So, you saw him play Hey Joe on the TV or miming it to it, that's one thing, But seeing what he could, was capable of in a small club with the audience he's playing for, electric, unbelievable. So I just went up to him after the show and said, hey, listen, I'm very into guitar sound and I've been working with, Pagey, the 200 and Jeff Beck and this and that. I'm really into the guitar sound. I said, I've got a brand new sound that I think you'll be able to handle this. It's really, really unique. He said, wow, what's it about? So I started talking to him, and we both discovered within 5 or 10 minutes of talking, we had an awful lot of common, a lot in common, because, you know, Jimmy was into science fiction and into the way that sound can affect people. You know, we can get into that later, but so he said, why don't you bring this device to a club I'm playing in a few weeks, which is at the Chislehurst Caves, which is just outside London and Kent. So I went there, and with the prototype, well, they're all prototypes, but a prototype of the Octavia. And I said to Jimmy, right, do you want to have a listen to it? He said, sure. So we were in the dressing room, we had a small little practice amp, and Jimmy plugged it in. He said, man, this is out of sight, this is unbelievable. He said, I've got a new song I'm coming up, he said, and it's going to be perfect for that. He said, for the solo part, maybe for another song that. I said, oh, great. He said, why don't you come along in 2 weeks' time after a gig he was playing in Hounslow at the Ricky Tick Club, and after the gig, we'll go down to Olympic Studios, and I'm going to overdub, bring the Octavia along, and we're going to overdub the solo to these 2 new songs. And that's after the gig. While Jimmy was playing in the gig, he actually had a Stratocaster, and had a very, very low ceiling, maybe a little bit higher than this one, but bang, you know, guitar went through the ceiling, and of course, you know, did the machine head, you see, bent the machine head. So, oh Christ, what are we going to do now? We can't use this guitar, because he only had one guitar then, you know. I mean, you know, it was times were tough. Jimmy's just been starting out. So Noel, when he had to run home, and went to one of his friends, and he borrowed a telly. So he got back to the studio, and it was a Telecaster that was used to record the solo for 2 iconic tracks, one of which was Purple Haze, and the other one was Fire.
Wow.
Now, you've got to realise, that was maybe 2 or 3 weeks after I met Jimmy, and within when Purple Haze was released, which I think, you know, sometime early March. Now, he went from playing a ballad, great solo in a ballad, to you know, Purple Haze, and that just set the music industry afire. They couldn't believe it. I thought, wow, where's this guy coming from? You know, he's out of space, he's an alien, you know, all the rest of it, you know. And so that's basically, as they say, that's the story of meeting him. And that's the beginning of the end, you know.
Well,
yeah.
So I mean, that's an incredible story in itself. I mean,
well, yeah. I mean, but that's the way it happened. So we realised when Purple Haze was released, and you know, it was released to great acclaim, you know, and it was the beginning of psychedelia. No, that was the definitive track back then. No one had ever played anything like that up to then, or even attempted it in America or anywhere. But it was not, because, you know, anyway. We decided, Chaz, we were all sitting up at the flat in Upper Barker Street saying, wow, you know, this is great, you know, this is Jimmy. Jimmy said, yeah, but are the public ready for what we can do? Because in the meantime, I've had another 6 weeks with Jimmy and hanging out with him and playing with sounds, and we're saying, and Jimmy going, yeah, we could do this, we could do that. I said, yeah. He said, but they're not ready for it. And then Chad said, yeah, you're absolutely right. You know, if we came up with another song of the same intensity and the same genre as Purple Haze, it would have been like planting a seed too early. You would have caught frost, you see, and it wouldn't have germinated correctly. So you would have lost momentum in the way that Jimmy was perceived, because they might not understand, which they wouldn't understand, because it's too far advanced for them. So Jimmy played the, you know, When Christ Mary was the next song.
Yeah.
So you go, Hey Joe, Purple Haze, damn, then When Christ Mary, and then that led on to, you know, a few other songs, and then at the same time, as you know, time's moving on now, March, April way. Then there was a concert coming up that Jimmy was interested in, and that was going to be Monterey. we were getting as much recording studio time as we could, and these tracks were being cobbled together because we knew by early summer we had to have an album because of the momentum of Jimmy performing live. In England, and we did 1 or 2 gigs in France and other places, but we needed an album, and so Jimmy put together these tracks at Olympic and other studios, and that became Are You Experienced?
Yeah.
But that was recorded like basically on the fly as Jimmy was touring, around England and fitting in the sessions. But it wasn't recorded with a fixed plan in mind. So around about May, right, we were talking about what we could do, because Are You Experienced, first of all, it was recorded in mono. See, there weren't many stereo records that had come out. I mean, in the summer of '67, I think one of the first major stereo records to come out would be Sgt. Pepper's. Maybe Disraeli Gears of the Cream and a few other ones. But when Jimmy's album came out, Are You Experienced, that really took the wind out of their sails a lot. But then we were planning back in May the recording sessions at Access Boldest Love, which would be set. The recording would be set over a period of 2 or 3 weeks, coming up in the mid-autumn,
Yeah.
a bit earlier than it is today in October. But anyway, so we could plan that, and that's what we were working to, and we were also working to fully understand what needed to be created with the actual movement of the sound using stereo, you see, and various echo effects and various other recording effects to give that mystical movement, because Jimmy wanted to, if you're recording, once again, if you've got the talent, you can play, and you've got the talent, it becomes not whether you can play, it's, well, what should we play, because it's an open book. And so, yeah, it was very, very interesting leading up to that. And so we were looking forward very, very much to recording the new album, which would be then released around Christmas time, and that would be Access Boldest Love. So we went into the studio together, and I was there for most of it, and helping Jimmy not only with the sounds but with at home and hanging out and discussing what was possible. Yeah. So very, very interesting,
Absolutely. You spent quite a bit of time on tour with Jimmy as well, didn't you?
No, I only did one tour with Jimmy in America, but I was present, like in England. I seen Jimmy play live maybe 80, 90 times.
Yeah.
That's a lot. That's quite a few. So, I mean, but actually on tour, now I don't like touring, I mean, the actual tour that we went on in America was very exhausting. It's considered one of the worst, the most debilitating rock and roll tours ever, No, no planning, no backstage management. We had no staff, We travelled very light, only 5 of us. There was Jerry Stickles, myself and the band. That's it, 5, nobody else.
So it's a small team then.
Oh, yeah.
We've spoken a few times before about Jimmy's Strat. You rewired them slightly for him, didn't you?
Well, yeah, but basically, you see, a Stratocaster, if you understand how the guitars work, if you don't, it does depend. It really doesn't make that much difference if you can't hear the difference. But depending upon the wood of the Stratocaster, you don't really need that tone control that's the furthest away from you. No one ever uses it. But it just gets in the way. You can take that one out,
Yeah.
But we just used to leave it off, take that one, to take that one out. And then we would concentrate just on maybe, the 2 controls that are there. You can't, I made one guitar for him that was used in, we put in some other toggle switches, and where the 3-position switch is,
Yeah.
For recording, we had one that had 3 toggle switches that turned the pickups off and on. So that gave you 7 combinations of pickups, whereas even with a three-way, that then became a 5-way. But in the studio, it doesn't matter, you just click that. So you can have all of them, you can split them, you can do this, you can do that. You get 7 combinations if you put the toggle switches in, which is interesting. And of course in the studio, it's great, you know. But for performing live, no. The most important thing of performing live was to make sure that the guitars didn't get stolen, number 1. Number 2, that they didn't get too destroyed. Because Jimmy got angry and put them through the ceiling or put them through the loudspeakers, or he raked the side of the amplifier with them.
Yes.
That used to rip out the frets and do damage to everything. Or he had sex with the guitar against the amplifier. So that was the most damaging action he could do, because then the pickups, right? Back then, the pickups were staggered pole pieces, yeah, on the Fender. Now, when Jimmy's like that, staying in front of the amplifier, humping the amplifier, the actual magnets get bashed down, flat, breaks the coil.
Yeah.
So then we would end up with 3 guitars, say, in the dressing room, of which we've only got like maybe 2 pickups that work. So because all the rest of the other ones have been destroyed. So then, what are you going to do? You know, the next day, you've got to take the guitars apart, and you've got to, you know, cobble together the actual pickups that are still working, and put them back into a guitar, you know. And then at the end, when Jimmy did, you know, like, I don't know, the last number, we have what would be called like the sacrificial guitar. So that's the one that he occasionally would break up into pieces, or set on fire, or whatever. But that one normally was wired up with no controls in it, straight lead. So it didn't matter what Jimmy did, there's sound coming out of it, you know. He could jump on it, do this and that, you know. It's still gonna, you know.
It's still gonna work.
Oh, yeah, for sure. That was the point of it. And if any of the other parts inside the guitar were salvageable, we'd have them out, you know.
So how many would you say you got through a month then?
Hard to say, because we didn't have that much money even back then, and the guitars, of course, were very, very expensive. I mean, let me give you an idea. 1 hour's recording at Olympic, right? £38 in 1968.
What would that equate to now?
It works out about, you know, maybe £800 an hour.
Yeah.
To record.
Wow.
So the actual recording costs, very expensive, and you had to be able to play, and you had to get it, and you had to be serious. I mean, a Stratocaster guitar, 1964, was 140 guineas. That's about 150, 160 quid. Now you could buy a brand new Mini for £500. So it's a third of the price of a car.
Yeah. So why do you think Jimmy used Fenders? Not Strat specifically. Why?
Why? It's the best-selling guitar for him.
Fair enough.
And also he plays upside down. I remember that. But they didn't make any left-handed guitars back then.
Yeah.
You couldn't buy them. I never saw a left-handed guitar until about 1970. Never saw it.
Seems crazy now, doesn't it?
Well, not really. But you see, not many people could afford Stratocasters. It was a professional guitar. It wasn't you had to be a professional musician to buy one. I mean, it's just like, you can't rock up and, go down to some place like, I don't know, and buy a Stratocaster. I mean, the price of a Stratocaster in the Orient now is 70 quid. So, it was, the cheapest guitar you could buy, like a Stratocaster back then, would be the equivalent of £5,000-6,000.
Yeah.
That's standard. That's what they cost.
It's amazing. I mean, that now is a custom shop Strat, master built, in fact. So it's,
Well, they didn't have master built. What you had to do was, you were lucky to find them. When we were buying Strats in New York, we'd go to Manny's and this and that. If Manny's had a shipment came in from Fender, you'd have to open every box and have a look in it. And you don't have to play the guitar, just put your hand around it and, if it felt right, you sort out the ones that, you go through 20 to find maybe one or two, and money can sort the rest of them.
The one or two that were the ones that would be good.
Well, they have to suit your hand, don't they?
Yeah.
So, that's the thing. I mean, instantly you pick up a guitar and you put your hand around the neck, you know if it suits you. I mean, everyone's hand's different, so it might suit somebody else, I mean, Jimmy's had big hands. I mean, I've got pretty big hands, but I mean, Gibson for him, is too small. There's no room for his sausages to fit on the fingerboard. You can, but you can't play the same way as a Stratocaster. Also, the actual tonal quality of the Stratocaster is superior for playing live, really, than the Gibson, because it's more cutting and more precise. So to play live, you've really got to think about a sound that's distinct and clean and projects well into the audience, and that would be a Stratocaster. A Telecaster, on the other hand, does not have enough body for playing live. It does not have enough power, you see. What you actually want from a guitar, if you're playing live, is it's got to have sufficient power, which means the frequency response in the body, right? It can't be muffled because you need the clean attack of the sound, the articulation of the guitar, not only to enhance your playing, but to enhance the actual listening experience of the audience, because then they can hear what you're playing. Because people forget that when you play live, you automatically inherit the acoustics of the auditorium that you're playing into. You can't do nothing about that. It's there. So you're going to pick up the echo and all the other nasty artifacts that you might have. So that's, So the Fender becomes the de facto most versatile guitar for that. And it's got the whammy bar on it, hasn't it? So that's a big plus. And you can't compare, what's it, the Gibson, what's the camera system on it?
Oh, Maestro.
No, the actual Bigsby. You can't compare the Bigsby tremolo system with a Strat. The Strat one is much more expressive and much more dynamic, and so forth. That suits Jimmy, and he plays upside down. So, he can get to it, Also, playing upside down is quite interesting, because there's a little thing for the rest of the people who might be listening to us, recollect it. When you play guitar upside down, not only do you inherit the different shape of the wood, because the strings are reversed, you also inherit the different string lengths. So the string length of the top E now becomes the shorter string, which is the reverse if it was a normal guitar where there isn't much extra string length on the bass string before it hits the machine.
So that will affect possibly the tone and the tension of the string as well.
Well, not only that, the total length of the wire, that affects your ability to bend it.
Yeah.
So now you're trying to bend a string that's shorter than it would have been normally on a regular one. And that's one of the reasons, that Jimmy might be, sometimes detune the guitar.
So you've done a lot of work at Olympic Studios with Jimmy,
yeah.
And then you worked there after that. Is that correct? You moved to the
not
US?
for long. I came there and I got married in New York, and then I came back to England. Started working at Olympic for a little while, and was still developing the pedals and this and that, and building some of the recording studio, the consoles for them. And then I went back to New York and I got married and I went to live there. But still, we could going backwards and forwards to England. So.
With recording consoles, things like that,
Yeah.
most of them nowadays you could just buy something kind of off the shelf and it gets installed. What was it like then?
No, you couldn't buy a recording studio console. All the major studios, including like EMI, Abbey Road, CTS, Decca, all of these studios had to build their own, right? And the reason they did that was obviously because they wanted their own particular sound. So then it came down to the subtlety in the way the microphone preamplifier is, and the topology, you know, of this console, how people wanted the equalizers to be and where the stuff was positioned and so on and so forth. But that's how it happened. You had no option. If you wanted to build a top line studio that's totally state of the art, you had to build your own console.
Well, yeah, it really was pioneering, I guess, at that point. You know, recording.
Well, it is.
So much was changing so quickly.
Yeah, it's changing, and also that's the competition, wasn't it? You see, so when I went to America, and you know, I'm living in America, and I'm visiting all the major studios in New York, and they were all very welcoming. I was right there at the beginning of, you know, obviously Electric Ladyland, Atlantic Studios. We did the Record Plant, Media Sound, Columbia. All the major studios by about 1971 all had RM equipment in it. You know, equalizers, limiters, noise gates, all that. So my major business then was supplying them with unique pieces of equipment that changed the sound of the records. Once again, I told you, I was always been interested in making electronics that change the sound of what people hear in the record, not what they're playing in the bedroom, the actual stuff, the professional side of it, because you know that's the fun part, isn't it? You know,
Absolutely, yeah.
so that's pitting your brains against the best in the world, and that's how you have to look at it. When I come up with a new piece of electronics or Sound and Sound talks about my stuff, we're going up against the whole industry. No, I'm not worried about that. You know, you have to attack it. You know, and you know that's how you get respect. You see, but you have to take it on. And you know, I mean, the other year I got inducted into the Hall of Fame. You know, Innovator of the Year. See, so I mean, that's in America. So, but that's what you have to do, you know.
We've talked about some iconic guitarists, but
Yeah,
I'd like to talk a little bit about Stevie Wonder.
yeah, Stevie Wonder. Yeah. Now I got involved with Stevie Wonder because he was recording or beginning to record the trio of albums that were recorded at Electric Ladyland. Now I got pulled in by an English engineer called Malcolm Cecil, who was working with another American guy called Bob Margolis. And these guys had been working, but they were building at that time. They started to build the first multi-timbral synthesizer, because there wasn't one around there. All the synthesizers you could buy would be Moog, ARP, and a few other manufacturers. They were just one tone, see?
Yeah.
So they come up with the idea that they used 2 or 3 manufacturers with different, they use different algorithms to produce the different tones. And then we link all the keyboards up together so we get multiple sounds from one keyboard. It's never been done before. And it turned out to be about the width of this room.
Yeah.
And if you see a picture, it's called Tonto, it was called. And it was the most advanced analog synthesizer in the world. And I ended up building about 30% of it.
Okay, so big portion.
Well, yeah, but I built the interfacing of the modules. I didn't, you know, we took Moog modules, we took ARP modules,
Yeah.
and then we took the interface in between the keyboard and added a few other like state of the art digital manipulations so you could play them together. And that was used on 3 albums by Stevie Wonder, Music of My Mind, Talking Book and Inner Visions, which probably a lot of people say they were the best albums that he did, you see. So I mean, but that was the blending of 3 basic, very, very good sound sources together, done well with Stevie, yeah. So I mean, great songs, you know.
So so this would have been in the 70s then. So
early 70s, yeah. Jimmy was still alive, and in fact, you know, I was in one session with Stevie Wonder at a media sound when we heard the news that Jimmy died. You see, so I was in New York and Jimmy was in London. So yeah, I went on from Jimmy because Jimmy wasn't, you know, really recording in the same way he had before. And then the opportunity came to do this, which is brand new, breaking ground. Electric Lady, so I said, yeah, let's do that. And then after I did that, obviously I moved on to work with the Stevie had a car accident, and then he recovered from that. Anyway, he went out to California or whatever. Anyway, I went on to work with the Isley Brothers.
How was that?
Because they called me out and I didn't really want to work with them, and then they took me out to them, and I met Ernie and all the family, and they were so nice, and Ernie was great and he could play great. So then, so I started with them. I did all the albums with him. I did 10 or 11 albums, I think. Sold, helped him sell about 25 million, 30 million records.
That's incredible. And were you working as a studio engineer?
No. I just work as I don't be in the studio all that time. I just work to help them realise their sound, give them the equipment and all the inspiration of how to use the sound, see? Or if they're playing live, or, you know, there's a few things you can do to help an artist. You don't have to be there all the time hovering over it.
Yeah.
And if they've got a problem, you know, you can call me up, because I'm not ready for hire for that type of work.
Fair enough.
But
that led you to Bob Marley.
Yeah, well, when I was working with the Isleys, and this we got some time, then I've got a friend of mine. Mario Medius, he was working with Atlantic, and he was the head of the president of Manticore Records, which was Emerson, Lake and Palmer's record label. And he called me up. He said, "Oh, Rog, you got to hear this guitar player. He's fantastic. You know, he loves Jimi Hendrix and this and that." So I went out to see the guy. I said, "Yeah, I think I can help him." You know, and that was my beginning of my friendship with Junior Marvin from the Wailers. Well, it wasn't with the Wailers then. So we did these albums, and I helped Junior, and then I went on to record an album with Junior in England and a bunch of other session musicians back in about 76. We did it in Kent, and, you know, and that album was the album because we were mixing it and recording it around Island Records. That was the album that got listened to by Chris Blackmore. That got him signed to Bob Marley and the Wailers. So then Junior went to be the lead guitar player with the Wailers. And anyway, so the tracks that we recorded, we just finished the album. We still got them, but probably going to release them next year.
Now, you got contacted by Stevie Ray Vaughan, I believe.
Yeah, that's right. I used to drink in this pub, which we call the Office in New York, which is near where I lived, you know. And it was the publicist. We used to drink in a publicist called Charlie Comer. He was the Beatles publicist previously, and he lived in New York. And he obviously knew of me, and he said, "Oh man, Rog," he said, "I've got this guitar player who we're trying to break, you know, Stevie Ray from Texas." I said, "Oh, right." He said, "Yeah, you really should hear him. You know, you've got to hear him because, you know, he wants to meet you and hear about Jimmy and so forth." So I said, "Fine, it's great." Yeah, I said, "He gave me a couple of tapes to listen to." I said, "Oh yeah." Next time he's in New York, basically, so that's how I got introduced to him by his publicist.
What did you think when you first heard him then? Was he...
Hear him play? Yeah, when I first saw him live, first of all, when I first met him, very, very nice guy. Sweetheart, soft-spoken, very generous. You know, it's the type of guy, you know, instantly you feel at home with no ego. He left his ego like way down the road, you know. No.
Lovely. Yeah.
So when he got on stage, yeah, he could play.
And can you hear some of the Hendrix influence in his playing?
Well, he's obviously influenced. Most guitar players after Jimmy died are influenced by him, whether they want to be or you know, it would be hard for them not to be.
Yeah.
If they like playing the guitar, they'd have to listen to Jimi Hendrix, wouldn't they? Who else are you going to listen to?
It's a good question. I mean, well, we look at the list of artists on your books, and
Yeah.
there's quite a few to pick from in there.
Yeah, but they've all in some way been influenced by Jimmy.
Yeah.
You see?
Absolutely. And it's,
I mean, you can't. Well, what I'm saying is, you can't get away from the fact that Jimmy's music has lived on since we started. Really, it's 1968. And once you've heard Jimmy and you heard Purple Haze and you heard the song, how can you not be influenced by him? It's impossible.
yeah, I certainly am. I'll say that. It's
I mean, you know, that's the way it is. It's the same thing with, I the guitar players. I mean, I met Buddy Guy with Jimi Hendrix, you know. I mean, Buddy, when you know, when he hears Jimmy, you know, or they jam together, you know, they're not the same, but they share certain things in common. It would be the same as listening to. You'd have to have a good ear to be able to listen to some of the other guitar players that played with the soul guys back in the era, you know, like with Pickett and there's a few of them around, but they kind of share a certain amount of stuff, you know. It really wasn't, you know, I think when John Lee Hooker went electric, he kind of set the world on fire a bit, you know. He started playing a Strat, you know, I mean, but Jimmy, you know, Hendrix, he never considered himself a blues man, you know. Jimmy wasn't a blues man. He said, no, I didn't grow up there. He said, I wasn't a sharecropper, I wasn't this, I wasn't that. You know, so for Jimmy, yeah, I like playing the blues, don't mind it, but I'm not a bluesman. There's plenty of bluesmen who are alive, you know.
yeah.
Because when I first went to America, the first concert we played was with Albert King, you know, who was both one of our favourite players, you know. And Albert's great, you know, such a nice guy, you know, wonderful player. Plays upside down too. When I say upside down, he plays the right hand guitar, doesn't bother to move the strings. Just plays upside down. So that's, but I know for a fact that when I used to go around the flat with Jimmy, yeah, we used to play or jam, I had to play upside down.
Yeah, no choice. Yeah.
No choice. Here's the guitar, I played it up. It's upside down. Oh, you'll figure it out. Yeah.
What was it like being around so many of those great players? You had Jimmy Page around,
Yeah.
Eric Clapton too?
No. Eric never hung out in the same circle as us.
Okay.
No.
So just you guys, just, you know, in a flat.
Well,
London.
yeah, or in London if we were there. I mean, the people that we used to hang out with, obviously people like Stevie Marriott. I mean, you know, George Harrison was around a bit, you know, and not Eric Clapton. No, he was frightened to be around Jimmy. Frightened him to death. You know.
I can imagine.
Yeah, but you know that was the funny thing is that Jimmy was the type of guy who loved to play the guitar. So it's hard to explain, but yeah, he just wanted to have fun, play the guitar. He didn't care if he was playing the bass or playing the guitar. He wanted to have fun with people, and he wanted to be around people who wanted to have fun. Yeah. So, you know, I come and play the guitar, let's have some fun. Yeah, and that's the way it was. It wasn't like, oh, let's jam. Oh, what song have you got? Jam? Are you crazy? That's not jamming, you know. You just play the guitar, you know. That's what it's about. I mean, it would be like someone saying, oh, I've got to practice my solo. What? That's not a solo if you've got to practice it. But by definition, it's not a solo. I mean...
Yeah, no, I understand that.
I mean, part of my job with Jimmy was to get Jimmy, you know, be with Jimmy, to get the confidence and the right sound. So when we went into the studio to cut the solo, or the the actual position of where the solo is going to be, that what would be called the solo part that Jimmy never played before, he was in the right frame of mind. It was not a case of whether he could play, or what he's going to play. It's just get Jimmy, yeah, I've got a feeling, in the right frame of mind. Maybe I need another drink. You know what I'm saying? These things are just as important. The most important thing in recreating what becomes an iconic performance is feeling it. You've got to feel like doing it.
Yeah. Absolutely, it comes across as well when you see a play. When you see a player live who's in their element, it's so enjoyable.
Well, it's enjoyable for them, and then that transmits to the audience. You see.
Yeah, and you kind of get that feedback loop going between.
But the hard part is once you've done it in the studio, that energy and excitement and sound, it's got to be recorded and go through all the processes and come out the other end on a loudspeaker somewhere else in the world and still create the excitement.
Yeah.
And that's what I personally find is it's satisfying because I could be somewhere, doesn't matter where, say in the Caribbean, in a bar, and Purple Haze comes on. Now, I personally am immediately transported back to the time where we recorded. I'm not going to turn around and say, oh yeah, by the way, I was there and this and that. Fuck that, I know I was there. So, but that's what it does. So yeah, and it's interesting to see that people really enjoy the sound.
Yeah, you can definitely hear it, and we've been selling your pedals for a while now, haven't we? We've had about 5-6 years, something like that.
Maybe longer, yeah.
Yeah. And so, what made you decide? Because we're the only place in the country that does them.
Well, what made me decide it was just quite simple. Was that when I first met Devil, I came to the shop. I thought, oh, this is good because now this is a shop, right, that really likes guitars and caters for people who like guitars. It's not just about, price cutting and box shifting and this and that. The guitars that you have here, and it's a very, very nice collection of guitars, stands on its own. So the body of guitars you have here stands on its own as a collection, see? So that means that anyone who rocks in, who walks through the door, and you get a lot of famous people come through the door, but that means they come here, they gravitate here because you have the selection and you have the vibe, so they can now choose what become like their next girlfriend, which is their guitar. But they probably spend more time with the guitar than they do with their girlfriend. And all that right for you, what am I saying? Because that's why the guitar friend becomes very, very personal to a guitar player. So it's very important for them to have the right guitar that suits them. And it's not about hype, it's not about publicity, it's not about, I want a Jeff Beck guitar because Jeff Beck played it. I mean, you don't sell that many replica guitars, do you really?
I think it's very difficult to say, because sometimes it can be, we do sell signature models, but also I think the guitars, if you take a Cherry 335 with the block inlays, you instantly, people buy Clapton, Eric Johnson, they think of those players. Maybe that's a big part of it. And some people just love the history of the guitar and the companies and buy them based on that.
Yeah, but at the same time, it's professional players who can play, or people that can play, that guitar's got to suit them. They're not going to buy it just because someone else used it, are they?
I think from a lot of the session players we see, they tend to, if they want a Strat sound, they buy a Strat. They might not buy a signature one. They'll buy something that suits them. We do sell guitars to a lot of session players. Actually, they come in, and they've really got an ear for what they want.
Yeah, but that's because a producer wants a specific sound, and that has to be produced in that manner. But that's what I'm just saying is because you have a nice selection, the person will gravitate and he will buy the guitar that fits his hand.
Yeah, that's definitely a big part. The one that feels right in the hand. I think it's a three-pronged attack with it. Price doesn't matter too much in a lot of cases for people. Once they're in the shop, because we do get a lot of customers that come in and they don't know what they want. You know, they know they want a guitar, but they come in, they'll look at things. So first it's visual. Do they like the look of it? That's really important for a lot of people.
Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. I don't know. It's the fact of the matter is, because the choice is there, it's a bit like going into a nice restaurant where you've got a great menu.
Yeah.
It becomes a problem. Oh, what do I order?
That's also a problem. You know,
yeah, well, but that's a good problem to have. And there aren't many shops that offer that kind of selection and relaxed atmosphere to attract people who you know want to have that experience. You know.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think your pedals fit in perfectly here.
Thank you. Yeah, well, you know, I mean, there is no need with the modern marketing and the ability of the various logistical companies for actually someone to not take advantage of that, especially in America, because in America, you know, the chances of you living near a great guitar store are basically zero, because it's a very large country. And even if you lived in Los Angeles, you can live in the other end of Los Angeles, you're still 40 miles away.
Yeah.
And and it would be a nightmare to get to go, say, Norm's Guitar downtown, whatever. So, I mean, you know, the chances of you finding it are nil.
Yeah, yeah. To find what people might call a proper guitar shop, you know, that's dedicated to guitar. You know, we have lots of general music shops around us as well that, you know, do everything. But to go into a dedicated guitar shop in an old building as well, you know, a lovely old building
it's a nice setting. It's a nice market town, and that's the way I see it. Is, you know, it's not a pilgrimage, but I mean, if someone's interested in guitars, they have a fantastic selection of guitars here. I mean, I would say to anybody, I mean, you know, if you get a chance, and this is for anyone who lives abroad or in England or something, it's an experience for you to come and see the guitars.
Yeah.
Because it's not like a trip to the museum. Yeah, it's a living museum because you can actually buy one if you want to. You know, but it's not like going into some kind of high street store where the salesmen have got some like kind of attitude and this and that. You know, I mean, that's what people used to say. Oh, I didn't like to go to that guitar store because they intimidated me as well. You know, yeah. You do get guitar stores like that. I said, you know, I'm sure most of them have disappeared.
Yeah.
By now.
Yeah, it's very old guitar shop retail. I think was that, you know, you go in, you've got a surly person behind the counter.
Oh yeah.
You're not worthy type vibes. No, we're very very much not on board with that. We like to welcome everyone.
Yeah, yeah, you know, you obviously don't get, you know. There's always a niche for the best, isn't there?
Yeah, absolutely.
It's like they say, when your instinctive good taste seeks out the best, you won't settle for the rest.
Yeah, well said. Well, this has been a great catch up with you. It's been a long time coming. I mentioned we've been dealing with Roger's pedals for 6-7 years now, and we've talked about doing this interview for at least 2 of those years, I think. So it's good to finally get down to it.
It could be the first of many other interviews that we could talk about, because there are many other subjects, and you know, we haven't yet talked about the actual recording methods and the recording equipment that we actually make today that I use, you know, up to now.
And that is that's a long topic in itself, isn't it?
That's for maybe another time, but we can talk maybe in a little while. We can talk about some of the pedals. I would like to put on record for you the some of the philosophy behind the different designs.
Yeah,
and so you would you'd be able to pass that on to your.
Yeah, so what we'll do then, we'll get this. We'll wrap up our interview there, and then we're gonna look at each pedal individually. So we'll have separate videos for each one.